So, hi guys. Um, so now again the burden of proof is on me. So I'm gonna present a second evidence or the second argument. It's actually called a teleological argument, or telos comes from the word design or purpose. It basically means that things have been purposely created. So the teleological argument or the purposeful argument can extend from the universe all the way to our galaxy, all the way to the Earth, and all the way to you. So this is actually my perfect. Thank you. This is my favorite argument. The it's called a yeah. You can go. Yes. Sure. Oh, there we go. So it's called the fine tuning of the universe. The fancy name is the anthropic principle. And what this argument actually states is that the universe was fine tuned for life. So what scientists have discovered was the Big Bang was not just a bang. It wasn't just a chaotic explosion. It is better understood scientifically as a finely tuned expansion event. So what this means that within the first few milliseconds of the Big Bang, this expansion event actually occurring, the laws and constants that govern the physical universe actually came into existence. So I'll give you an example of one of those laws, the law of gravity. So now Fred Hoyle, who coined the term Big Bang, was actually one of the initiators of um, this discoveries. So what they found was that the gravitational constant, or the constant governing gravity, was fine-tuned to 1 part in 10 to the power 34. Then the cosmological constant, which comes from Einstein's equation, 1 part in 10 to the power of 120. Now, just to put this into perspective, in the known universe, there's only 1 to the power, or 10 to the power 83 particles that exist in the universe, in the known universe. So the number of atoms and molecules in our universe, we're talking about 1 to the power of 83. So 1 to the power of 10 to the 120, that's more particles that actually exist in the universe. That's how big this number is. Then we get other constants like the mass density of the universe. It was fine-tuned to 1 part in 10 to the power 59. Now, Roger Penrose, who was with the singularity theorem, he worked out that the initial entropy, which was the initial state after the Big Bang, was fine-tuned to 1 part in 10 to the power 10 to the power 123. Now, that figure just blows our mind. You can't even begin to imagine this mathematically. But this is from secular scientists, and they all have accepted this, and they all believe this. So let me put this into perspective for you, and how I like to look at this is, who's watched a lottery, or bingo, right? So just imagine now, there's all these constants. Do I have a picture? So all these constants, right? That come into existence within the first few milliseconds of the universe. So you can imagine each of those constants represented by a lotto or the bingo machine, right? Now inside each of those bingo machines, right, is certain number of balls that you can have. So let's call the first bingo machine gravity, or the gravitational constant. So inside that bingo machine, there's 10 to the power 34 balls inside there, right? That's a huge number, right? So, and we go down the line. Now, if any of those were slightly out by even a fraction, so say instead of the correct ball for the gravitational constant coming out of that bingo machine, another ball comes out. Universe would not exist. Life in this universe would not exist. Because gravity would either be too strong or too weak. If it was too strong, everything would just collapse upon itself. No stars would form. Likewise, if it was too weak, then it would expand too fast. So that's how fine-tuned it was. So the right ball, only one ball of that 10 to the power 34 balls in this machine had to pop out at the right time. So imagine all these bingo machines lined up. The Big Bang happens, and at the right moment, within the first milliseconds, all the correct balls just pop out. Just take a breather there. 1 part in 10 to the power 10 to the power 123. This is science. Everybody, all scientists have agreed with this. So now this was very awkward for scientists, and Fred Hoyle, the discoverer, was at that time an atheist. He was the astronomer who coined that term, and he's quoted as saying that his atheism was greatly shaken at these developments. I wonder why. He later wrote that a common sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super intellect has monkeyed with the physics as well as the chemistry and the biology. It's amazing how monkeys somehow always get into these discussions. So there's a story I want to tell you. We love the Rockies. We lived in British Columbia for a while, and we used to go often to Jasper and to Banff. And there's the story of Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson going to camp out in the Rockies. And in the middle of the night, Sherlock nudges Dr. Watson and he says, "Watson, look up. What do you see?" And Watson turns to Sherlock Holmes and he says, "Dr. Holmes, I see stars. I see billions of stars." And Holmes then turns back to Watson and he says, "What do you deduce from this, Watson?" And then Watson takes a deep breath in and he says, "Well, astronomically, I can see that there are billions and billions of galaxies. Astrologically, I can determine that Saturn is in Leo. Horologically, I can tell that the time is approximately 3 a.m. in the morning. Where am I? Just had a brain pause. Astronomically, horologically, and meteorologically, I can tell that it's going to be a fine day outside." And then Holmes turns to Watson and he says, "Watson, you fool, someone has stolen our tent." That's exactly what has happened to us. They have stolen our tent. They have confused us with all these ologies, horologically, meteorologically, but we miss the obvious. The obvious is out there. So what scientists would have us believe, you see, they are faced with the data. And remember that filter. They cannot accept a foot in the door, a divine foot in the door. So they have to come up with this concept called the multiverse. The only way they can make sense of this from a naturalistic point of view is the concept of a multiverse. Now, some of you may be familiar with the multiverse if you like Spider-Man or Marvel or Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Now, these are crazy movies. You can see the ridiculousness of the multiverse even in these movies, and I'll get to that. Now, Sir John Polkinghorne says that this is, let me just explain what the multiverse actually is. So what the scientists would believe is that there is a universe generator. There's some machine out there that's bigger than it, and it just keeps popping out universes. And there's millions of universes out there. There's actually an infinite number of universes out there, and they all got their own different physical constants and laws that are governing those universes. So you can see these universes are just popping out. And amongst the infinite or the billions of universes out there, most of them do not support life, right? Because they're not fine-tuned. They don't have those fine-tuned characteristics that we've had. And only one universe, or maybe one or few of them, actually hit the jackpot, won the lottery, and life was allowed in that. Now, you want me to believe that? Where's the evidence for that? Where is the scientific proof for that? We cannot see even beyond our universe. And Sir John Polkinghorne says, let us recognize what these speculations for what they really are. This is not physics, but in the strictest sense, it is metaphysics. It is a belief. This is not observable science. So how can you propose this to be science? And the problem with the multiverse, and you see this well in the Multiverse of Madness, you see this well across the Spider-Verse, is that it can explain anything and everything. The famous scene that I like in the Spider-Verse is when Spider-Man goes to meet all his other Spider-Man colleagues across the multiverse, and there's a pig Spider-Man there. You know, you can come up with anything. Across the multiverse, there's a room exactly on some other universe here that I am talking, but I'm talking about something else to the exact same people. Because anything is possible, and everything is possible. It's just infinite number of universes. But why should we believe that? I think it takes more faith to actually believe in an infinite number of universes and something just popping out universes. And the problem that they don't see is you need to understand that it just delays the stage one step back. Because somebody had to have created this machine that pops out all the universes. There's still no free lunch. So I think the Bible says it so well. Colossians 1 verse 17. He is before all things. First argument. He is the cause. And in him all things hold together. Second argument. All the things, the delicate balance between the gravitational constant, pulling things in, the cosmological constant, pushing things out, that delicate balance is fine-tuned. And in him, all things hold together. That is why Paul says it so clearly in Romans 1. What may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood by what has been made. That's a serious charge. So that no people are without excuse. When you stand outside and you look up at the heavens, you should appreciate the magnificence and the glory of God. And science is telling us that. That is why people are without excuse. Romans 1. So, let's let's keep going on. And I want to go deeper. I want to zoom in a bit. Let's zoom into us, what's inside each of us. And another argument is this argument of DNA, right? So what is DNA? DNA is this biological structure that is found in each of our cells. It consists of 4 chemical molecules called bases, right? So I don't know if you played with, what are those things called? Not Lego blocks, those bigger blocks. Duplo, or those they're bigger blocks. So just imagine these blocks, but there are only 4 types of blocks. So and we're going to call each of those 4 blocks A, C, T, and G. So there's only 4 possible types of these blocks, and they form an alphabet. Our alphabet has much more letters, but there's only 4 of these letters in this biological alphabet. And the sequence, the specific order of this, the way A, T, C, and G, sometimes it may be A, C, G, T, G, A, that's the specific order of this form a code. It's called the genetic code, and it's called biological words. And it provides the information that a protein needs to be formed. And proteins are essential for life. No proteins, no life. Because proteins are basically the molecular machines that do all the work within the cell. Now, how does this code point to God? Before we get there, I just want to give you just a quick crash course on what DNA is. So you have this code, right? So just imagine you put all these Diplo blocks together and it forms a really long word. And then you get something called mRNA, which is messenger RNA, which comes and transcribes, right, this molecule. So it makes a copy of this molecule. It's like a fax machine, right? So it makes a copy of that. And then this mRNA then leaves the cell, and then it is translated, right, by a different system to form amino acids, and then this amino acids form the protein. Okay, so I'll just quickly show you just a brief video of this. Right, so now you see mRNA being formed, right? So the DNA is actually being copied here. So the DNA splits and there's a copy being formed, and that's called transcription. Notice the word transcribe. It's a language word, right? So this happens in the nucleus, and then the mRNA moves out of the nucleus into the cytoplasm, and then it is translated. These are amino acids coming, right, to form the protein structure. So this is called translation. Again, it is a language word that is being used. And then it moves to another machine called a ribosome, which folds up the protein, and that's how a protein is formed. So how does this point to God? Interesting question. I'm glad you asked. So some of you may have heard of SETI. Anybody heard of SETI here? SETI is called the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. I kid you not. This was a real project. It still is a real project. It started in the 1960s. It was a government-funded project, right? So the United States government plus several governments across the world decided to put satellites in like abandoned places, like the deserts. And so these satellites are listening into outer space. They are listening for anything that has a pattern, anything that has a level of complexity, any noise that could suggest, hey, there's extraterrestrial intelligence out there. So days became months, months became years, years became decades, and they still found nothing. They've still been listening, so the government decided, we're not going to waste our money out there, let's just pull the plug, but it's still privately funded. So we had our camera team sneak into the city offices, and this is what they found. This is what city engineers actually do in their spare time while they are waiting and listening and waiting and listening to outer space. Yet inside of your 30 trillion cells, there is a word. It's a biological word that is both specific and complex. What do I mean by specific and complex? It is pretty complex. Why is it complex? It is about, let me see if I have this. It's about 3.2 letters, 3.2 base pairs. So only a fraction of these are coding for proteins. The rest of these, from what we've discovered, has different functions, but it still has a purpose. And so it's a set of genetic letters. And in order to type out the human genome, a person would have to type 60 words a minute, 8 hours a day, for a period of about 50 years. So it's also specific. Why is it specific? Because it has function. Inside that long word is areas that code for specific protein. And that protein is essential for life. And notice the terminology here, transcription and translation. This is what we use as biological terms to describe that. That itself should tell you that's information. Because only information can be copied, transcription, and translated, right? So we know from common sense that information comes from a mind. SETI knew that. That's why they're listening to space in the hope of hearing some. Notice the double standards here. We know information comes from a mind. That's the reason why they've got all these big satellites. No information, no life. It means no mind, no information, no life. We know this from computer codes. We know this from linguistic texts. We know this. Even the archaeologist who's digging in the dirt, he finds something in the dirt that has some scratches on this. He knows how to recognize whether there's intelligence behind that or whether that's just a rock that has been eroded. We use this all the time. And Bill Clinton, when the human genome was finally deciphered, he said, "We are learning the language in which God has created life." And Stephen C. Meyer said, "God has put his signature in each of your life, in each of those 30 trillion cells." Now, there are other arguments that I'm not going to have time to talk about, and this is the argument of irreducible complexity. Scientists, even Richard Dawkins has said that in defining biology, he says that biology is the study of life forms that have the appearance of design. So you notice that he admits that it appears to be designed. So with this concept of irreducible complexity, Charles Darwin, when he proposed the theory of evolution, he started with the cell. They didn't have the technology to know what was inside the cell. So they just thought that the cell was just a blob of goo. So in order for evolution to progress, you must have the cell. The cell is the starting point of their theory of evolution. But now we've invented stuff like electron microscopes, and there's even, I forget the term, that's way beyond that, that now we can even look at the proteins within the cell. And what scientists have discovered is that the cell, each cell is actually a very complex factory. It's composed of little machines in there. These proteins are doing very complex. You saw just the transcription translation. That's just an oversimplification of what's actually going on. But these are really complex. And so what scientists have done is that they have reduced some of those machines to its bare minimum, right? So that's why it's called irreducible. So they've reduced and reduced this machine till they come to the point where they cannot reduce it anymore. It's called irreducible complexity. So the famous example is a mousetrap. You know, a mousetrap. In order for a mousetrap to work, you need the platform, you need the little spring, you need the actual metal bar across that. Now, you can't reduce the mousetrap any further. Because if you take out the string, or if you take out the spring, if you take out the platform, or if you take out the bar, it doesn't function as a mousetrap. Because you need all those different components for it to function. So the classic example that we use is called the bacterial flagellum. So that's a little part of the bacteria that allows the bacteria to actually move along. And flagellum are found in different of our cells as well. But they've examined this flagellum and they found that this is remarkable. This flagellum, this piece of protein and this equipment is it's like a little motor. It has a rotor, it has stuff that you find in a motor. And it clearly looks like it's being engineered. And the problem with the bacterium flagellum, you cannot reduce it any further. Because if you take out any part of it, it has no function. So how can that actually form from evolution? Because evolution you need something to be functioning, then another thing to be functioning, then they decide, hang on, let's just function together. And that's how you slowly build up. So that's what I briefly mean by irreducible complexity. Then there's the concept of consciousness. I'm not going to tell you more. That's a really exciting part of the whole evidence for the existence of the soul, and this is one of my personal interests. And this is the concept that the mind is not the brain, and the brain is not the mind. And even atheist philosophers and atheist scientists are struggling to actually come up with this concept. How can the brain do all that the mind is actually doing? So the concept that we believe is that the mind, the consciousness and mind is actually evidence for the soul. And we are getting evidence of the separate functioning of consciousness away from the brain, the physical brain, from the medical literature. We're getting scientific articles and scientists are puzzling about this. Also this concept of miracles. Miracles occur. And over the centuries there have been thousands upon thousands of miracles that have been reported. And all you need is one of them to be true. If one of them is true, it proves that matter is not all that there is. How am I for time? Do I still have 15 minutes? Okay, so let's just talk a little bit. Before I get into evolution and maybe the age of the earth, I just want to pause there. And I just want to say that I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. I don't. When I look at this evidence, they want me to believe in a multiverse. They want me to believe in a universe that just pops out of nothing. I'm sorry, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. But And coming back to my question, has science made atheism extinct? I think it has. But why do people still hold on to it? I think man's main reason for refusing to worship his creator is not a lack of evidence for the creator. Paul makes this clear, Romans 1. But because man wants to worship himself. And I think of Hazel, I think of the Hazels out there, seeking out her favorite author. If only she sought out her creator. No, Hazel, you are not in error. You are not just a product of matter. You're not just a speck orbiting a speck. You have been created in the imago Dei. You have been created in the image of God, and that's what gives you value, meaning, purpose. And we all are. Christians, non-Christians, we're all created in the imago Dei. But the Christian worldview extends further to that. And people struggle with their identity, with their value. If you were here at my talk yesterday, you look at the cross. The value of something is determined by the price you are prepared to pay for it. And the question I want to leave you with is, what price did the infinite, transcendent, all-powerful God of the universe pay for you on the cross of Calvary? That is how valuable you are. And he doesn't just stop there. He wants to have a relationship with you. When you accept him in your life, he enters into the relationship and you become his child. What a privilege. This God who created the universe, who fine-tuned the universe, he wants to have a relationship with you. So, if we have some time, I just want to touch a little bit on evolution. Now, there's a story of a child running to his dad, just tears in his eyes, just completely shattered. And he tells his dad, I can't believe it, Dad. And his dad tries to console him for a full 5 minutes. And his dad says, what's wrong, son? Why are you crying? What is wrong? And his child turns to him and says, Dad, Mom just told me that we come from apes. And so his dad just looks at his son and says, no, son, that was your mom's side of the family. So, human evolution. Now, this is the most famous argument that's thrown in our face. But do you see how many points that it misses? To start with evolution, you need a cell. So we already know we have a fine-tuned universe. We have a universe that popped out of nothing. We have a fine-tuned earth, which is something that I didn't actually go into. Then you have the improbability of something inorganic becoming organic, because all life consists of organic material. And then this is the real table turner. It's called abiogenesis. It's called, how does something that's non-living suddenly become living to form the first cell? And there is no answer. Science has not come up or solved the problem of the origin of life. Because the more we discover and the more we think about the origin of life, we find just how improbable it is for non-life to suddenly become life. To have these chemicals that suddenly in some fire pit somewhere when the universe is being formed and being bombarded, somehow life suddenly comes into existence. And Dr. James Tour, who's an organic chemist, I highly recommend his lectures on the origin of life. He's from Rice University. You can YouTube him. He's an excellent resource for that. I'm not going to go into the problems with just the origin of life. Let me tell you something, the thing that you read in the scientific textbook of some soup that they made and they somehow came up with amino acids, that's been disproven ages ago. That got the initial conditions of the universe completely wrong. And you can't just suddenly just get amino acids. Anyway, amino acids are non-living. And that is those, I think it was the Yuri Miller experiments. Those experiments were done 60 years ago. Not only is it wrong, there hasn't been any significant process in 60 years of science. You look around you. We have cell phones. We have how much science has transformed in 60 years. Yet with this question of the origin of life, there remains nothing. So when we consider evolution, we need to get the definition right. When we consider evolution as meaning change over time, no one disputes that. We all agree that there's something called microevolution, which species change themselves over time. So the first humans were slightly different from how we look. So the first dogs remain slightly different or markedly different to the dogs we have now. I mean, because of the inbreeding and the different types of dogs. So nobody disputes that. But where we dispute is going from one species to another, because we just don't see the evidence for that. And that's called macroevolution or Darwinian evolution. But there's also another aspect to Darwinian evolution, and that's called common descent, right? So what that means is that we all descended from like some common ancestor, and then we all went on different roadmaps. Now, the process that they propose is called natural selection acting on random genetic mutation. Can you see where they get error and chance from? So this is the process behind evolution. So we know that the process is based on this concept of survival of the fittest. It's unguided and unplanned. Now, the problem with that is that it doesn't disprove the existence of God, because God could have started the process once he created the cell. But there are significant scientific problems with that. The first thing is so obvious. Similarity does not equate with common descent, right? Just because we have stuff that are similar to animals, it doesn't mean that we came from them, right? So different cars have similar things. If my sons love the Legos when they were young, so if one of them builds a Lego of a plane and he builds a Lego of a house, yeah, they're similar. They have the same Lego blocks in them, but they have a common designer. That's the reason why they're similar, not because the car became the house. So similarities in physical appearances and genetics may suggest a common designer rather than common descent. Now, the next point is the mathematical challenges, right? If you use the secular worldview, the Earth is only 4.5 billion years old, what science teaches us. And when the first life forms start appearing in the fossil record, there's just not enough mathematical time. Mathematicians are disagreeing with biologists. There's just not enough mathematical time for all of that processes, for the random mutations to actually create new body plans. Now, what we've also discovered is that when random mutations actually act, so say when a bacteria becomes resistant to an antibiotic, that's the result of a mutation. But it's a breakdown of function. It chops and deletes part of its genes. It doesn't actually add new things and builds up new genes. So that's also what's really puzzling about this, then we have this whole concept for design, and we went through that. And then another stumbling block is the lack of transitioning fossils in the fossil record. Um, just imagine for one animal to become another animal, there must be hundreds of fossils in between that one animal to the other animal that chart this transition, but they're just not there in the fossil record. Instead, what we're seeing during this period called the Cambrian explosion, we are seeing just new body plans just emerge in the fossil record without any ancestors, without any transitional fossils sort of building up there. And my final point, if it was true, it still would not disprove the existence of God. There are Christians who believe in evolution, that this is what God actually did to create life. The only thing is they believe that God guided it. And you've got to think, even if evolution was true, how come we won the lottery? How come we are the head of the food chain? How come we rule the earth? Why is the shark, any of you watched the movie Deep Blue Sea? You know, those intelligent sharks? How come, those sharks aren't ruling the earth? How come they all started the Darwinian march with us. We all started with that cell, and we all, again, you gotta, every step of the way, we sort of win the lotto all over the process. So this is a famous diagram. And what they want us to, and we have to explain all these skeletons that we have, these hominid skeletons, these skulls, these skulls that have been found that, are similar to humans, but are not just quite humans. And certainly they are bipedal from what we get from the fossil record. And we are forced into a naturalistic inference. It's not science. That somehow this became that, became that, became that, became us, right? So number one, there's a few problems with this. It's a problem of humans are not just animals, right? We have speech, we have language, we have science, we do math, abstract thought. We are not just bipedal apes. There's much more to us than just being able to walk, and even on the fossil record, those are just bones. Those are inferences. It's interesting to find out, the larynx. The larynx in a chimp is very different from a larynx in a human, because a larynx can't actually speak. Chimps can't actually speak or use their larynx or create the sounds that we make, because the position of the larynx is different. In fact, we are more in relation to parrots and to birds with regards to our creation of sound. So where then to the chimp? So where did that come from? The eye, right? The eye is blowing people away. The concept or the design of the eye. And evolutionists have a big problem here, because they believe that random mutation suddenly created the eye. But if you look at the octopus eye, it is remarkably designed and very similar to the human eye, which means that the octopus in the ocean started on one Darwinian path and the human started on one, but they ended up with the same similar eye. How is that possible? They come up with a term called convergent evolution. But somehow you're just telling me that, this is the process, but there's no octopus here to somehow get the octopus was in the ocean. So there's a different way to explain this. God could have created that, God could have created that, God could have created that, and God could have created that separately. We don't have to believe that that is, but why aren't we told that? So I think I'll stop. I'll stop there. Thank you.